Hi, how's it going? Welcome back to my channel. I hope you're doing well. It is really hot today, so I'm sweaty. Today we're going to be doing my May reading wrap-up, and it is a big one because I managed to read 7 books this month. Granted, this big one I kind of read across the span of 2 months, but I finished it in May. I do have a couple decoys in this pile, as usual, for the thumbnail. They are not real. I mean, they're real. They're physically here, but they're not books I read this month. So with those taken out, these are all the physical books that I read this month. I have 2 that I read digitally. We got a lot to talk about, so let's just get right into it. The cover on this one does not want to stay down, and it's pissing me off slightly.
Robert, it's pissing me off.
But not for long, because this is the first book that I read this month, which is Sunburn by Chloe Michelle Howarth. This is a sapphic romance. It's set in the 90s in a very small village in Ireland. It's a very close-knit community, super small town vibes, super religious town vibes. And it follows these 2 young girls who are in high school together. They're about to graduate and kind of get into the real world. But we end up following our main character Lucy as she's kind of navigating these complicated feelings that she has for her best friend Susanna. And she quickly realizes that these feelings are not just platonic in nature. And we kind of follow her as she's going through this coming-of-age high school story, but also a reckoning, basically, with her queer identity and what this means for her, what this means for her family, because her family is obviously part of this very small, conservative, kind of repressed town. And so she's trying to navigate her feelings and her friendship with Susanna while also not destroying her family in the process. And it is just as emotional and heartbreaking in that way. As you might expect with a coming of age story like this, it does have its hard moments, but I think it was really beautifully handled, and I think that it's a very realistic depiction of navigating a family dynamic when you are coming out like this, especially with the religious aspect that Lucy's kind of navigating. Can I say navigating anymore? Feeling like she is a sinner and that she's going to be going to hell, but how could she when everything with Susanna feels so right and so loving and so safe, and she's never felt more like herself than when she's with Susanna. And so it is a really beautiful but also sad story. The writing in here is just fantastic. It's so beautiful. And it is in first person and a teenage character. I was expecting it to have that feel. And it is melodramatic at times, for sure. But the way that Lucy views Susanna, the way that she thinks about her and talks about her is just so gorgeous. It has that kind of all-consuming, passionate feeling of a first love, especially a first teenage love. And it's just really beautiful. There were some things in this that I wasn't the hugest fan of, namely with some accountability things that happened towards the end of the book, and also how unlikable Lucy can be at certain moments, especially again towards kind of the middle to end. But I still really enjoyed this story, and I really loved the romance between these 2 characters. I think it was very realistic. It just felt extremely real, and I loved watching these 2 characters develop a bond and how they both kind of grew with and without each other. So I really did love this, and I think that the hype surrounding it is 100% valid. So I did give this one 4 stars. I was kind of leaning more towards a 4.5, but then some stuff towards the end took it down a little bit for me, but still a very, very solid read. Super gay, super adorable, and overall I just really loved this. I'm very, very happy that I read it, and I always want more stories like this. Also, I ended up making my tabs the lesbian flag colors, which was kind of accidental, but then very intentional as I went on. The next book that I read is the biggest of the bunch, and that is Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. This is by far the biggest book I've ever read. It's the most complex. It has the most world building in it than anything I've ever read. And it was definitely a Herculean effort to read this. I don't really read gigantic tomes very easily. I think that they often are very intimidating to me. So let me tell you what it's about before I give you my rating. Also, a lot of these I did read in reading vlogs, so if I have a video where I talked about those more in depth, I will link them in the description, and there'll be a little photo card on the side. Also, backtracking to Sunburn, I read that in this vlog over here. Again, it'll be linked in the description. So this one was in a couple vlogs because I was reading it for a very long time. I didn't talk too much in depth about the world building and the plot of this one because I said I was going to save it for the wrap-up because there's just so much to get into. So this ends up following 4 POVs. The world building in this, like I said, is incredibly intricate, and it takes place across 2 different sides of the world, the West and the East, and it has 2 POV characters from the West and 2 from the East, and we just kind of ricochet back and forth between all these different characters. The plot lines that happen in the West and the East are largely separate for the vast majority of the book, and only towards the end do they all intersect. So I'm going to talk about them as just separate entities, effectively. So in the West, we're following our main character, Yd. I say main, even though there are 4 POVs, she, I think, has the most POV time. So we're following Yd Durian. She is a lady in waiting who serves Queen Sabran of the Queendom of Innis. And from the very beginning, there is something more going on with Yd and why she is there serving the queen. She's not just a lady in waiting. It seems like she is a protector, a defender of the queen, kind of operating in the shadows to make sure that she is safe. And we discover more throughout the story of why that is and why she's there and what her true goal is. But we end up following her and Sabran as they develop a relationship. At first, their relationship, their whole dynamic is very rocky because Yd is not just a typical, like, fawning over the queen type of lady's maid. She is more honest. She's a little bit more forthcoming. And so this dynamic that kind of starts out rocky, it does warm into something of a mutual respect, and later on more than that. But the whole storyline in the West is centered around this political intrigue that is happening. There is a war on the horizon, and we're kind of following that as it's brewing because one of the kingdoms in the West has kind of defaulted from the shared religion that all these kingdoms have, because suddenly dragons are awakening from their 1,000-year slumber, and this kingdom has basically become a draconic kingdom, worshipping the dragons and being under their rule. And this is kind of the whole fraught dynamic that's happening in the West between the religious kingdom of Innis and then this draconic kingdom. There's another character in the West who's doing like other political intrigue things in the draconic kingdom. And then to contrast all of that, in the East you have a very different political system, you have a very different religious system. The East has a very good dynamic with their dragons, the Eastern water dragons. They are seen as benevolent gods, creatures that benefit the people and the land. I'm having a hard time remembering what happens in the East for most of this book, I'm not gonna lie, but we end up having a convergence of these two different worlds, these two different cultures, having to unite for a common goal and a common purpose to protect humanity and save the world effectively. And that's just grazing the surface of all of this. There is just so much in here. Let me tell you, there is so much packed into these 700 something pages, and it can definitely be a little bit intimidating. This was my first epic fantasy on this scale, where it is just so elaborate. There's so much world building. There's so many political systems. So many names are getting thrown around for all these different political leaders of all these different countries, and the dynamics of these countries and how they interact with each other. There's just hundreds of years of history between all these different countries and kingdoms compacted into this story. And a lot of it is relevant, some of it maybe isn't, but all of it does contextualize the world and how things are the way that they are, why each side of this war is fighting for what they're fighting for, and it is just overall a really, really well-crafted world. Overall, I did have a really good time with this story, but there were a few things that kind of made me pause here and there, or things that detracted a little bit from my overall enjoyment of the story. I don't want to go into too much detail about those things because it would be spoilers probably. I was debating doing a spoiler section for this wrap-up for this book, but honestly, I have so many books to talk about still that I'm not sure if I want to talk for like 30 minutes about spoilers for this. So I think I will probably just skip the spoiler thoughts that I was gonna say. But to basically summarize those things in a non-spoiler way, I just thought there were some plot conveniences and contrivances that felt a little shoehorned in just to progress the story or to get a character from point A to point B, to put this situation over here, whatever. So there were some moments where I kind of caught myself predicting what would happen next because I knew that the story had to get to a certain like setup, a certain stage. So I was like, oh, this is gonna happen right now. This character is gonna show up. This creature is gonna show up, whatever. Stuff like that. And I also thought that there was just an insane degree of plot armor for all these characters. I was definitely thinking that more people were gonna die and not enough people died, let me tell you. So I did give this 3.5 stars. I think that it's very solid. I mean, it's literally solid, but also the story is solid. The world building is great. I don't know if I want to continue with the series. It has 2 prequel books. One of them is like 800 something pages and one of them is like 200 something pages. I've heard A Day of Fallen Night, which is the really big one, is really, really good and people really love it, but I don't know if I want to do another 800 page book right away. So that was Priory. I tried to acquire a guest star. She did not want to stick around, but that was Tori. I haven't shown her on the channel in a little bit. We're still fostering her and trying to see if she will be chill with the cats, but it has not been very chill. She hates the boys in the house. She does not like testosterone, I suppose. It's just been a lot of hissing and growling and swatting and just overall hostility. Anyways, I got so many books to talk about still, so let's get back into it. The next book that I read in May is On Sundays She Picked Flowers by Yaya Schofield. I talked about this one a lot in a recent reading vlog. I really loved it and went a lot into it in that vlog, so please watch that if you want more in-depth thoughts on it. This is a sapphic horror taking place in the 1950s, 1960s in the South, and it follows our main character Judith, who is living with her mother at the time, and the home dynamic with her and her mother is very bad. It's very hostile. Her mother is physically and verbally abusive to Judith, and there's a whole lot of other just generational family trauma going on. Following a very bad confrontation with her mother, Judith runs away. She gets in the car and she starts driving just to go somewhere to get away, and she ends up driving and just kind of going until she reaches this very secluded, very small town in, I think, Georgia? Yeah, southern Georgia. And for context, Judith is a black woman in a small, very white town. And it is the 50s, 60s, so segregation is very much a factor at this time. She tries to get a room at this bed and breakfast, but the white owner just wants like nothing to really do with her, doesn't want to be seen serving a black person. But she can very easily tell and see that Judith has been through a really violent situation and says, hey, if you want a place to like crash and get away, there is this abandoned cabin in the woods. It's on my family's property. You can have it free of charge. And the woman does warn Judith. She's like, hey, this place is super haunted, by the way. Judith is like, don't give a shit, I'm gonna go there. So she goes into the woods and it's very boggy, swampy. It's a really beautiful, lush setting. Like beautiful in like the rotting, decaying, swampy way, I suppose. But it's a really beautifully botanical setting that this takes place in. Judith ends up going to that abandoned house, and it turns out that it was previously a plantation and, like the owner said, is super haunted by all of the haints and the ghosts of people that were killed there. Immediately, like super bad vibes. The haints are very aggressive towards her. The house is almost like a sentient being and tries to get rid of her, but Judith is made of strong stuff, so she does not back down. She doesn't leave. And eventually the house and the haints kind of recognize something within her, something that they sense as like a kindred spirit with them. And so they end up embracing her, and Judith stays there for like over a decade. There's a big time skip in the middle of this, and being a general like bog lady, it's very fun. Things seem to be going well for Judith in her swamp girl era, when suddenly a woman shows up. A mysterious stranger shows up on her doorstep looking for a place to stay for the night. And Judith, being kind of starved for human connection at this point, does take in this woman, and things start to escalate and develop in a very sapphic way. I cannot tell you anything else about what happens in the rest of the book because that's all like synopsis stuff basically, but I don't want to reveal anything that happens later on. I just really loved this story. It was so fascinating. I felt so just enthralled by the whole atmosphere and the characters, the really rich family dynamics that are in here, because there's a lot of talk of generational trauma, cycles of abuse, and of course taking place on a plantation, it talks a lot about the lives of the slaves that lived there and their restless spirits. Goodbye. The whole story, and especially the dynamic with Judith and this strange woman, it just has this like all-consuming feeling about it. The dynamic with the two of them is just so big and powerful, and I just really love it. And the ways that this kind of like feral, monstrous energy overlaps with feminine energy in this book. I just really loved it. I really loved this. From the very beginning, I was totally enraptured with it. It's just so rich. The writing is fantastic. The setting is so good. It's just all around so good. I gave this a 5 stars in case you couldn't tell. This is like the 3rd 5-star this year or something like that. I've been very strict with my 5 stars this year. Not really on purpose. I just haven't had a lot of books that gave me that instantaneous 5-star feeling. This one did. And despite being so short, it just packed quite a punch. So glad I read this. Highly recommend it to anybody who likes horror. It's not like the most horrific thing ever, but there's definitely some moments in here that are a little gross. I just really loved the whole package. It was wonderful. The next one is one that I read read digitally. I'll put the photo on the side, and that is Skipshock by an author. I can't remember her name. I'm sorry. This one is a YA fantasy. It is dual POV. It follows two characters, Margot and Moon. It follows Margot, who is just a normal girl riding a train to Dublin, when all of a sudden something happens, something shifts, and she is on a different train. A completely different train, completely different vibe, and the only person on this train with her is a young man called Moon. Through talking with Moon, she realizes that she has fallen between worlds and is now in a completely different world. Really, the most interesting aspect of this story to me is the world building and how it's kind of set up. In this new reality that she's in, there are multiple worlds who are all stacked on top of each other that are all connected by a train line, like literally trains going through the sky and like punching through it into the next world. And each world has a different number of hours in the day. So for example, the world that she finds herself in has a 6-hour day, and there are worlds that have like a 13-hour day or 14 or whatever. Some even have like a 2-hour day or a 4-hour day. But basically the whole kind of world building around that is that the worlds that have the more hours in the day are more wealthy, they're more powerful because the people live longer. She just keeps going back and forth. And the worlds that have fewer hours in the day are more poor, more oppressed, generally just used for like quick, cheap labor. And all of these worlds in turn are ruled by one specific world called Semper, I think. Margot ends up finding out through all these different people, including Moon, that there is a rebellion underway where all of these more oppressed worlds with the fewer hours in the day, they are trying to rebel and overthrow Semper. There's this whole underground resistance aspect, very like 2000s dystopian YA vibe. And I will say this is where the story kind of lost me, because I understand the concept of what's happening here and I think it makes sense, but there are so many gaps in logic and gaps in the world building that make no sense. I didn't really enjoy this one very much because there were so many moments where I had to suspend disbelief because things weren't explained properly, or certain things that should have been a factor were not playing a role at all in the story. I also think that the romance between Moon and Margot was really not for me. It was super insta-love. Goodbye. And I really just didn't think that their chemistry was realistic or believable. I think that some of the side characters were fun, but they didn't really have enough character development going on. Overall, there was just a lot of things that I found weak about this. As much as the premise was interesting, I think that overall the execution was a little weak. This one just wasn't really a hit for me, and I was also hugely disappointed by the ending because it ends on a massive cliffhanger, and there is no book 2 in sight. So I gave it 3 stars overall. It was okay. The next book that I read is also a digital read, and it was a graphic novel called The Infinity Particle. I don't remember the author's name, but it'll be above me somewhere. I really don't want to talk about this one for very long, to be honest, because I didn't like it. Spoiler, I gave it 2 stars. I have forgotten basically all the details from this. I kind of just threw them out of my brain as soon as I finished it. I also read it in one sitting, which doesn't help. What I remember is that it follows our main character, who, again, I don't remember her name. She is in robotics. She starts working at this robotics facility. The facility is led and run by someone that she really looks up to. It's like her idol in robotics. Most of the robots in this world are like cutesy little critters and animals. They are very adorable. The art is great. That's basically the best thing about this, was the art, in my opinion. But she ends up meeting a robot made by her idol, who is a human-shaped robot. They are in like a human chassis. The graphic novel just ends up exploring like, can robots have human feelings, and can they dream? Can they want things for themselves? Can they have aspirations? What kind of defines like sentience, consciousness, humanity, etc.? It's very surface level though. I think this is YA. I definitely think it feels YA, except for the romance. There's a romance in here that just does not make any sense to me. It's between our main character and the like human robot person made by her mentor. I don't think it's weird to have like a human robot type of romance. I've seen that in other sci-fi works and that it can be done very well, but this just felt so strange to me because the main character looks like 12. She looks so young, and then the robot character looks so much older than her, especially because he's like freakishly tall and she's really tiny. I don't know if they ever say her age, but it just feels so weird because she seems so young. But it's also weird because of some story things that happen like later on, especially the dynamic with the robot and his creator, and like how that all kind of plays into things. And then there's a comment later on where they're like very heavily implying that they're gonna have sex or something, and it's like, did his creator, who he calls mother by the way, did she give him a penis? And why? Especially when you find out what her motive was in creating this robot and like the meaning she infused into this robot. It just gets really weird. In short, obviously I didn't like it at all. all. I liked the art, but that's about it. So sadly, that was a dud for this month. I've been filming for an hour and I still have 2 books to go, and they're also like very daunting books to talk about. So I'm a little cooked at the moment, but I do not want to lose my momentum at this point. So let's keep going. The next book that I read is Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. I'm gonna have some hot takes. If you do not want to hear my hot takes about this book, I recommend you skip to the next book. Just a heads up, it's not like I'm going to tear this book apart or anything, but I'm going to tell you right now, I didn't really like it, which is really a huge bummer because this is a classic. It's a modern classic. So many people love this book. It's one of the more like prophetic sci-fi dystopians about kind of the reality that we find ourselves careening into at the speed of light. And I do appreciate this book for what it did at the time and what it continues to do and what it continues to mean today, especially because this book takes place from like 2024 to 2028, I think. But I do think that just because something is a classic or a modern classic does not mean it's above criticism. So I am going to critique this one a little bit. I'm sorry. I wish I could say that I loved this and gave it a 5-star like everybody else seems to, but I just really had issues with it. So just briefly to talk about the premise of this one, it follows our main character Lauren, who is living in a small walled-in community in America. This version of America in 2024 is very dystopian, very messed up. There's so much crime and violence as well as climate destruction that has happened to get them to this point. And our main character, living in one of these walled-in communities, is still aware of what's happening and sees it on like the news and things and sees what happens to some of the people in her community and to the people outside of the walls, but is largely unaware of just how bad things are in the country. Basically, the first half of the book takes place in her community, and as she is navigating situations that are happening within the community and people that she knows, her own family, seeing the destruction that's happening to her own neighborhood as people are getting robbed and their houses burned down and things like that. And then the second half of the book takes place outside of this community as she is wandering and surviving with other people on the road. So this book does feel very post-apocalyptic at sometimes, like The Road by Cormac McCarthy. It has that kind of vibe, especially the last half of the book. But one of the huge things in this book, one of the huge themes and factors that's kind of playing into the story is religion and Lauren's belief system that she has kind of created called Earthseed. She talks about it as this whole like God is change thing. I just really didn't resonate with the religious and spiritual themes of this book because I've largely been very critical of organized religion for my whole life. I do identify still as pagan, even though I don't really practice anything anymore. I have had my own struggles with spirituality throughout my life and kind of feeling like I need something to be there, but I'm not sure what exactly fits there. And I think part of that is just I'm unable to suspend my disbelief a lot of the time when it comes to religion, that you're supposed to just have faith in something and never question it. I'm just really not good at that. But this isn't about like my own religious and spiritual experience, but this book is really heavily focused on Lauren's spirituality and her experience with religion. Her father's a preacher. I can't remember what like denomination they are, but she has kind of grown up with a certain religion presented to her. And the first half of this follows her kind of taking that apart and dismantling it and then putting together her own religion, Earthseed. Like I already said, those aspects of the story just did not work for me at all as someone who struggles a lot with belief anyway. Especially later on when she is outside of the community and she's like 18 and she's trying to preach her religion to other people. I remember how I was when I was a teenager and how strongly I felt about my own beliefs at the time. And like I can just imagine these characters listening to this 18-year-old girl talk about her made-up religion and being like, girl, what is she on? And some characters do kind of question her and make her analyze and think about her own beliefs and what they mean and what is next for the religion, what her goal is and the community she wants to build and all these things. So I do like the aspects that it discusses of like dismantling your belief system, being critical of religion, being critical of your own beliefs and making sure that you're believing in something for the right reasons or that you have good intentions or whatever. But some other problems that I had were kind of about the world building in this and why things are the way that they are, how the country got to this point. I don't really understand how the country got to the point that it's at where some people are living completely mundane lives. Granted, they're still like very poor and whatever, but then there's also this like post-apocalyptic Mad Max situation going on in parts of the country or like outside of these communities where you have these massive groups of like effectively raiders who are like painting themselves completely like red and blue or whatever head to toe and doing insane amounts of drugs and then raping and pillaging and murdering and burning down all these communities. I just didn't understand why the whole country wasn't getting Mad Maxified, if that makes any sense. And part of it, of course, is having like these protected, wealthy communities living in their own little bubble that are like immune to the outside and they're not seeing what's happening outside. It didn't really address how like the average person is seeing all of this mass destruction, but then there's these pockets of protected groups of people. I don't feel like it really called that to attention. And another thing I didn't like about this was this insane age gap relationship in here where she's dating a man who's in like his 50s, almost 60s, and seemingly romanticizing it because no one really like has any issues with them being together. I just really did not enjoy that aspect of it. And honestly, there were a lot of things I didn't enjoy about this. I think the first half was definitely stronger. The second half started to reveal a lot of problems that I was having. And again, I know these are probably not popular opinions at all. This is a very well-loved classic, but I don't know, I just gotta be honest. I just don't want to have my opinion on something be dictated by what other people think of something, like loving something just because other people love it. So I'm trying to just be honest about how I felt about it and not be swayed one way or the other by the popular consensus on it. I think it's important to be critical of the media you're consuming. It sucks sometimes when I have a lot of critiques about something that's very beloved, but I just wanted to be forthcoming about it. I just wanted to be honest about it. So I gave Parable of the Sower 2.5 stars. I am really sorry if you loved this. I'm really, really bummed that I didn't love this as much as I wanted to. Okay, one more book to go, and that is The Stone Sky by N.K. Jemisin. This is book 3 in the Broken Earth trilogy, starting with the 5th season and then the Obelisk Gate. So I am not going to talk too long about this one because it's the 3rd in a series. It's the final book in a series. And to be totally honest with you, I cannot tell you like anything about who's in this book, where we are, what's happening without spoiling the other two. I just really don't want to spoil anything about this series because it is really, really good. So just to talk like very broadly about the series as a whole, it is a sci-fi, it is set in a post-apocalyptic climate crisis future. It is set on one large continent called the Stillness, which is a joke in itself because it is anything but still. The whole climate crisis aspect comes in because there's earthquakes and other natural disasters that are just wreaking havoc on the Stillness at all times. However, there's also a group of people called Origines that are able to tap into like the raw energy of the earth and do all sorts of things with it, but they are also able to quell all of these earthquakes and disasters. So they're very, very powerful, but they're also a very, very stigmatized people and are heavily regulated. Origines are heavily discriminated against and are usually ostracized from their communities or killed because they are capable of so much destruction. Of course, they're also capable of quelling the earthquakes, but because they have so much destructive ability, they are very, very stigmatized. There's these characters called the Guardians that go around and bring Origines to these very militant academies where they teach them how to harness and control their power, but they also heavily monitor and regulate the Origines there. Usually the Guardians are taking children because people are hiding their children and trying to get them out of their communities. The Guardians basically are coming in to try to take these children away before they're killed in their communities, taking them from their communities and going to these academies to help them quell the earthquakes and stabilize the Stillness. But there are plenty of Origines who fly under the radar and who are not detected, who have to live in hiding and in fear of their powers being discovered because, again, people hate them, people discriminate against them, and kill them. Many of the main characters and main players in this series are Origines, and so we get to see so much insane stuff happen because of these characters. It's so incredibly powerful, and because it's like this geothermal, like earth energy that they're harnessing, it's a really unique magic system that you don't see a lot in sci-fi fantasy books. Sometimes the magic system in this feels very much like elemental bending from Avatar: The Last Airbender, like especially earth bending. It's just a really, really cool magic system, and there are so many epic things that happen in this series. The world building is incredibly strong. There are so many compelling characters in this series as well, really strong dynamics between characters. It's just a really, really great series. So again, I can't really tell you what happens in this particular one, but I will tell you, I gave this a 3.5 star. If I had to rank these based on like my enjoyment of them, it would definitely go in order: book 1, book 2, book 3. The 5th season, fantastic, super amazing, loved it. The Obelisk Gate is still really, really great. And this one is also a very strong sequel, but in terms of my enjoyment, I did like it a little bit less than the second one and a lot less than the first one. The 5th season, book 1, goated. But I still really enjoyed this one, and I'm so happy that I finished the series. It has been a little bit daunting just sitting on my TBR because there's so much packed into these books. N.K. Jemisin is such a masterful incredible writer, and I know that when I go into one of her books, I'm just gonna have my mind absolutely blown. So I'm very happy I finished the series. This one was a really strong conclusion to this trilogy. I have been talking for about 20,000 years at this point, so I'm gonna go drink some water. Thank you so much for watching and for being here for this video. Please let me know in the comments down below what you read in May. What was your favorite book that you read? I would love to know. If you enjoyed, please consider liking and subscribing. It means a lot to me that you're here. If you're not feeling chatty but you want to let me know that you were here, why don't you drop a Earth emoji for the Broken Earth series. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.